This is Failing Justice.
Good evening, Failing Justice audience. Welcome to the Failing Justice podcast. I am your host, as always, Justin Carlson. I want to thank you all for tuning in tonight. Man, the weather's great, right? This weather is fantastic. I think this is this is what we've all been waiting on after our brutal summer. Football's in full swing. Baseball's in full swing. Playoff baseball. The weather's great. It's almost time for fires. I'm super pumped. So just like I'm sure all of you are after this scorching hot summer that we had. But yeah, welcome to the podcast tonight. We are downtown Dallas, Hello Studios, floor number 9, coming to you live. Always want to give a shout out to these guys here at the studio. Man, they really take care of us real good. So if you have any kind of producing that you need to do, give them a call. It's very, very much worth your money. So thanks for joining in tonight. I have a real cool guest with me tonight, somebody who I go pretty far back with. Gillen, what's up, man?
What's going on, brother?
This is James Gillen. James Gillen and I, we were detectives together for a few years. We knew each other a little bit before that, but we were, we worked major crimes detectives, major crimes in over in Gladewater, Texas, for a little while. And I have to talk about this, dude. So this is the truth. This is the God honest truth. And I didn't tell you I was going to talk about this, but I got to talk about it. We hated each other, bro. Did we not? Am I wrong?
In the beginning.
Yeah,
absolutely.
We listen. We just got off on the wrong foot. I think later on we identified some of those problems, but it took us a little bit. It took us a little bit to get to the point to where we could stomach each other. This is a true story, man. Like, this guy, me and him would show up, and we would just shut our doors. Our offices were right across from each other, and we would just shut our doors because, we couldn't stand each other, and there were obviously some people that were coming in between us and trying to cause us some problems, some of the law enforcement problem children. But I'm glad we came together, dude, because I think you understand me, and now I understand you, and it took us reaching that mutual understanding and figuring each other out. Because once we got over that hump, dude, we were fire. We were good friends outside and inside.
Absolutely.
I think one of our favorite pastimes would have been interview and interrogation. Man, we were batting 1,000 on that.
I don't think we ever lost, man.
No. What were your thoughts on that?
Man, we did some gnarly long interviews together, and you were like the yin to my yang, and the suspect didn't have a chance. Especially
man.
The guilty ones.
The guilty ones, dude, and it was fun, man. We put some really bad people in prison. They're still in prison to this day. I'm talking some real bad people that needed to go to prison, and to this very day, like there's not anybody. I've interviewed with a lot of people, and I know you probably have too. But there's I don't know how you feel about this, but there's never been anybody that I've enjoyed co-interviewing with than you. That's just the honest to God truth.
Oh, I feel the same way. We got to interview with lots of different folks, and it just nobody has that symmetry that we had.
Yeah.
The ability to play off of each other and use the techniques that we learned. And
as a matter of fact, I have a picture here. I want to bring that up. Give me just a second. This is from our days of interviewing. No, wrong one. Wrong picture. Give me just a second.
Well, I told you when you left, it was the thing I missed the
there
most.
There
we go. Us interviewing together and, working it.
So this guy, can't remember his name. Don't really care to know. He's in prison now. But the pictures, maybe somebody's seen this. I've had this. I think this may be in my intro video or something. But this is from a guy that I think he had beat his girlfriend's baby, and the baby had a brain bleed or something like that. And just it was in the hospital in Dallas, Children's Medical, and we got to interview this guy, man, and we taped those pictures there on the wall with those injuries, pretty bad injuries, and that's why they're blurred out. We're not going to put that on here, but
it's brutal.
Yeah, man. And that was just that. This picture right here is just what I love to do with you, man. Just investigate cases and do these kind of interviews. So that was probably like 2017, maybe
middle of our run, I think.
Yeah. 2017.
Was it? We'd been doing well, and we took a crack at that. And I remember he just denying, and then when you put them pictures on the wall, he couldn't take his eyes off of them. And I was we're on the right track with the suspect here.
Yeah, man, I love doing that with the guilty guys. So I would say that's probably my favorite pastime, dude. And I'm actually glad we became friends. I really am, man. You're one of the good guys in law enforcement.
I feel the same about you, brother.
But no, man, tell the audience a little bit about kind of your background, like when you got in law enforcement, how long you were in. Kind of talk about that for a little bit.
Absolutely. I started the end of 2007. I was hired by the Longview Police Department, and I went through the police academy. I had been in asset protection and loss prevention before that, and I had some health problems that prevented me from kind of getting in the track early on.
So I want to talk about that. Talk if you don't mind. Do you care? Talk about what happened.
I had a brain tumor that was giving me seizures, full blown. I think they call them like tonic-clonic seizures, and for most of my teenage years, that was my life. I was on a high dose of anti-seizure medication, and it left me in a fog, and it was obviously debilitating to any career in law enforcement. And nobody wants an epileptic cop. It's not even allowed. And but I had the tumor resected when I was 20, in March of 2006, and a year later I was applied with Longview PD, and I got in on my first try. So I thought it was fate. So 07, I went to the academy, started on the streets in South Longview, and man, it was everything. And I thought I was going to save the world. Every traffic stop, one traffic stop at a time, forever. And it was super busy. I was the low man on the totem pole, obviously, and so 5, 6, 7 assault, family violence calls a night, plus everything else that you can think of in a fairly crime-ridden town. It was good. It was a good indoctrination for my first couple of years. Then from there, I went to the Upshur County Sheriff's Office. Stayed there for 7 years, almost to the day. Did everything there from property crimes investigations, ended up in narcotics, did those investigations at the local level. Then I was assigned.
And I want to.
Go ahead.
I see you got we were kind of confined a little bit to what we could do with our facial hair, but I see you back to the narc look.
Yeah. Oh man, that was my favorite look, and the vintage T-shirts and jeans and boots, man. That was the trick, and it ended up with that a federal task force for 4 years, and it was. You take things for granted, but it was the best 4 years in law enforcement of my life. It was so much fun, other than working with you, of course.
Yeah, of course. Absolutely, bro. Wow. Yeah.
Just going all over the United States, man, chasing leads and things I never thought I'd be doing. And, all good things must end, I guess. And it ended, and then I ended up at a local sheriff's office and as an investigator, first with we caught everything in the beginning. I became the lieutenant and changed that, so we had specialized individuals to handle property crimes and major crimes and specifically child sex abuse crimes. That was rampant in that county. And
we did a lot of collaboration together.
Yes.
Even after after we left Gladewater, you went your way, I went my way. We still talked a lot because I was working child sex crimes.
We were the internet guy.
Yeah.
You were
and we talked a lot.
Absolutely.
Child porn cases and all kinds of different stuff like that. So,
well, you were part of the task force at DPD.
Man, I forgot the name of it, but the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force with Attorney General's office. Man. I remember we talked. We still held a lot of phone calls and bouncing things off of each other, make sure we're trying to do it right.
Well, even to this day, I bounced stuff off of you. I knew we thought alike but different. And if I had an issue with a case or I was stumped, I knew that you or one of our other friends, I reach out and at least get a different perspective potentially. Yeah. See if I was on the wrong
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just wanted to
you're good.
Talk about that.
So I was at that sheriff's office and stayed there for about 2 years. A lot of things your listeners might not know is one of them is that sheriffs come in and routinely just eviscerate their command staff.
Absolutely.
when they get elected, and for good reason or bad reason they do it. And so I ended up at the University of Texas System Police for the last 2 years of my career. And I was a patrol officer, but was quickly assigned investigations. did all the investigations for the agency, and did a lot of instruction and training. I have a lot of certifications in different fields of law enforcement, and that was great. And but some things eventually happened at that agency that kind of led me to believe that this was no longer the career for me.
Yeah, and you're in the private sector now.
I am.
You just like so many of my other guests, man, that I've had on, myself included. I mean, I'm back in now, but so many of my guests, man, like I've tried to paint the picture for the audience. If they don't know, I know my law enforcement audience knows, but the citizens, the people that don't really know. I mean, law enforcement's losing cops, dude, just by the dozens left, and good cops, man. Like, I'm not trying to like toot my own horn, dude, but I was a good cop, and same with you. You were a hell of a cop, man, hell of a criminal investigator, major crimes, dude, and that's what and we'll obviously get into this. I don't want to jump too far ahead 'cause we're talking about you, but man, law enforcement's losing good cops, dude.
I was responsible for some hiring, Gladewater PD, and with you there, and responsible for vetting and doing background investigations. I was doing that again at the third largest state agency in Texas. Not bragging at all, but just a place people should want to come to work. I mean, it's the state of Texas, and you're a state law enforcement officer at that point. You're kind of like DPS, but on UT campuses, which are everywhere. And we had, out of 5 candidates, 4 of them failed the polygraph for things like marijuana and just overall deception. Like everything the guy was saying was not true, and bad vibes, the whole 9 yards. Like we couldn't get good candidates, and that agency still can't in East Texas get decent candidates, people that want to come to work there, and they've even raised the salary. They're still shorthanded, like ridiculously shorthanded. Yeah, and it's plaguing. Agencies are using the excuse to hire anyone and everyone they can, whether they actually meet the qualifications or not. And so, like, to put it bluntly, it's the great dumbing down of law enforcement.
And that's a huge problem. I mean, law enforcement already have our battles, right? But then when we are losing. I've said this. I'm always going to say it because driving it into the ground, people get tired of hearing it. But we're going to have to say it till it changes. But like, we have lost control of our own narrative. Like, that is. We're just compounding the problems over and over and over, and exactly with what you just said with bad hires. So,
and then we expect those people to go out and serve the community and not give the entire profession a bad name. But I used to, in the trainings that I would give, I used to tell, and the rookies that I would train in field training programs, I'd be like, you are the representative for law enforcement as a patrol officer or patrol deputy. When you go out and you make contact with this person who's probably having a very, very bad day, if not the worst day of their life so far, and if you leave a bad taste in their mouth, they will think that is all cops everywhere. And it's lost. That's not a message that any agency that I'm aware of is putting out and trying to teach to their rookies, to their young officers. And then you have that, but then you have these guys that have 7, 8, 10 years in, they've kind of forgotten it in a lot of cases. They don't understand who they work for. Mm-hmm. And it's not themselves, and it isn't their chief. It's the citizenry that pays their salaries, the ones that pay taxes anyway. And if we're going to treat them poorly and not be knowledgeable about every aspect of what we're expected to do on a daily basis, how can we expect to have any community support?
Exactly. And you said something that kind of stands out to me. You mentioned cops who've been there 7, 8 years, but I would go even further than that. Like, let's talk 10, 15, 20, 30 years. Like these, I talked about it last week when Jason Compton was on the show. We're talking about toxic generational leadership that just kicking the can down the road, and these are the problems. And here's the deal. I always say I want to bring these conversations to the table. Like, that's my goal here. You know, we talked a little bit about that tonight when we were eating, but like it's got to go beyond a freaking conversation. Like, we have to, but that's what sucks is it's hard to get it beyond a conversation, but that's where it has to start, you know, and that's why I'm doing what I do here. But it has to eventually go beyond a conversation. But the problem is going to the toxic generational leadership that's been around, you know, since the dawning of policing. Those are the ones that it's really hard to change their minds. You know,
it's almost impossible.
And then that, yeah, it literally almost is next to impossible to change the minds of those that are in the leadership positions.
Their perceived success has led them to believe that they are absolutely incredible cops and have nothing really else to learn.
And you said it, dude. Perceived success. You know, I again, going to LEMIT. If you go to LEMIT, you're the Law Enforcement Management Institute of Texas, and you have a you know, a bachelor's degree or whatever, like that makes you prime for leadership. And I've said this for the last several shows because I've been talking to law enforcement sitting across from me. The conversation has been law enforcement, but I'm sorry. I know some people disagree with me, but I don't think I am a firm believer that you cannot teach a leader to be a leader. I think you can tap into their potential, let them sprout, and expand what's already in them. But these people that feel entitled, and I'm not knocking education because I know you got education, I got education, but these people that think they can go to college and get a degree and turn around and let's be a police chief simply because you have that. I've always said, you know, leadership to me is more a matter of the heart than it is of the mind. What kind of person you are, you know, how do you treat. One of my chiefs told me one time, he said, I watch people when we go out to eat. How do you treat the waiter? You know, do you say thank you? Do you say please? Or are you just like, you know, yeah,
it's beneath me.
More drink.
Right.
You know, like, I mean, because that's what it is, man. Because if you're a good leader, you're a servant leader, and you're out there on the front lines with the rest of them. But, and I'm not saying there aren't. I mean, clearly there's good leadership in law enforcement, but I think it's really ill and it's sick and it lacks. Would you agree with that?
I would say that it's rare. I mean, working in East Texas as much as I did, the times that I've worked under people that I could admire for their ability, the people that inspired me to up my game daily, is rare. I mean, I've worked for a few agencies, you know, sheriff's offices, like we mentioned earlier. It changes leadership, changes whether you can stay there or not. And it's on one hand, it's not even all five fingers of the men that I worked for that I was like, that's somebody I want to emulate. Everybody else was just so problematic, and it was caustic to one degree or the next, and it was miserable, and other officers felt that way, and it kind of went two ways. They either completely checked out, or they're on duty but they're not, or they left. And the officers that would you know, that left in those situations, some of them were very good, and the agency needed them, but the agency didn't recognize that. And I don't know how you fix that problem.
And going back to sheriffs getting elected and coming in and turning the entire. You went through that process, right?
Right, several times. I went through it at the Upshur County Sheriff's Office. The electorate, you know, we see issues with voting and people picking their candidate, and whether we agree or disagree. But at the sheriff level, it's just a popularity contest. And so, you know, being a good sheriff, being a good leader as the highest law enforcement officer in the county, can't be a popularity contest. But the election cycle every 4 years in the state makes it just pure popularity. And so if you have to make some tough calls as the sheriff, and enough people get mad at you, you might get voted out. And that happened time again. Happened to me at Wood County. Sheriff Caslew was my sheriff. He had a 25-year career with with Border Patrol, and left as a captain, retired as a captain, and Wood County hired him, and they elected him, hired him to be the sheriff, and loved him until they didn't love him and threw him out after like one term. And with him went 150 years of law enforcement experience, people dealing with the county every
yourself included,
day, myself included. And I actually, so at Upshur County, I left when I saw the writing on the wall. The candidate that won was not going to work for me. And so I left, found another agency to go to and stay in law enforcement. But at Wood County, I wrote it out. And I was even going to step down from lieutenant and just be an investigator. That's what I put on I had to fill out an application for a job I already had.
How crazy is that, man? So like you get elected sheriff, screw all the good guys that you likely probably have a few, and let's just be, I think we can all agree most cops are decent people. That's debatable. There's some that aren't, but I say most that are, right?
It's not so much in my opinion, it's not so much whether they're good or bad people, because I think it takes, sociopathic and psycho-optic personalities are rare in society. So set that aside. They're just people and they're flawed people. That's fine. But we can fix a lot of those flaws and a lot of those issues with just training, with just setting our plows deep, like my dad used to say and taught me. Still says it to this day. Doing everything to the best of our ability and learning and trying to figure out the right path for a case or for an on-scene investigation. That solves almost every problem.
Sincere training,
right? Yeah, the real kind.
We're not talking about the kind where we just, I call it herding cattle. It's state mandated, so we have to do it,
right?
But hold that thought, because I want to go back to the whole sheriff coming in thing.
Yeah.
What kind of crap is it that you can elect a sheriff? He comes into a department that probably may already be functioning just fine, have good investigators, good patrol deputies, and he can just, everybody knows they're scared to death. Am I going to have my job? Am I not going to have my job? And then all they do is while they were campaigning, behind the scenes, they've talked to their buddies. Hey, Big Joe, you want to come over here and be my chief deputy? We're going to run this county. Yep. And then they bring their friends in here who can be complete idiots. Who knows? And they just build an agency off of, instead of leadership, instead of integrity, they just build their agency off of friendships. And we know how friendships can collapse and what kind of problems that will,
absolutely
present once that happens. That's what happens, man. And I completely disagree with that. I don't think that should be allowed.
I don't know. I'm not smart enough probably to know how to fix that. But being able to walk into an agency and not deal with problems, but blanket, just get rid of 15 people. Or, at Upshur County, it was like 18 people either left. I was one of the leavers, or their commission wasn't renewed. So on Jan 1, they were no longer employees, even if they were in good standing. And to make that the moray for the agency statewide, it's disgusting, and I don't know how. I don't know who thought that was a good idea.
I don't know how you stop it either, other than stop it. Put some sort of legislation that says you can't do that, because man. But that happens on the national level too. You switch presidents, you've got a whole new cabinet. Secretary of State, Secretary of Education, all these things. It all changes.
They're about not using tax dollars effectively. Wipe it out and then see how long it takes
to crumble. Look at our current freaking joke of a. I'm sorry, guys. I'm not sitting here trying to say I'm picking one side over the other, but our administration that we have right now is just absurd on the national level.
It's sad.
Even because you take guys like the President of the United States, they put one of their buddies as the top cop. The leader of the FBI, or all those people change, and look what our FBI is doing now. It's weaponized completely to totally screw over the candidates who oppose them. And
it's never happened before in the history of our nation, which is a mouthful.
Yeah, man. And I try my best, and I told people when I actually started going from investigative podcasts, to start having guests and kind of doing it weekly, I told people, I said, I don't want to make this show just strictly about politics, but politics and law enforcement collide.
You can't separate them.
Yeah,
sadly.
And politics, not just law enforcement, but politics and the system as a whole collide. And you see it again on the big stage, and then you see it in Wood County, where I don't know what the answer is either, other than we've got to do something different. You know, we're just going to keep doing the same thing over and over.
It doesn't work. I mean, it doesn't work to throw out people that, you know, like myself and one or two others. We were working 60-hour weeks, but only getting paid for 40 because of the way, you know, the nature of this thing. But my victims, the victims that I was responsible for solving their case, didn't care if I got home on time. They want their case solved.
Right.
And, you know, that should be the ethos for the warrior ethos for an agency, is we do what it takes within the confines of the Constitution, the law, and policy, good policy, to bring a modicum of justice to these people that pay our salary and that require our services. And if we can't do that, then why are we in the business? If we refuse to do that, why are we here? You know, or if we're so lackadaisical in our duties, we shouldn't be getting paid for that. Like it shouldn't happen that way.
And that's why I always tried to align myself, especially as my career kind of progressed. And, you know, you mature in your career as you go. But that's why I always tried to align myself with people that cared about justice, that cared about their victims, that cared about their cases. Because, man, there was a lot of people that were just there collecting checks. There were a lot of good people there that had no idea what they were doing, but they were in a position just because their buddy was the sheriff or their buddy was the police chief, or, you know, but surrounding myself with those that had the same goals that I did, again, justice, victims, and sometimes, man, that was just kind of hard to find, especially in smaller agencies, smaller towns.
It's definitely rare. I mean, one set of, when we were on our way out at an agency, the chief administrator ventured to tell me that the only reason he promoted this person to sergeant was not for knowledge, leadership abilities, intelligence, and none of the bedrock foundational things that are required to be a leader in law enforcement. It was the only choice he had. He literally had no other candidates, so it was him or nobody, and he needed a sergeant. So that's not rare. I venture to say the smaller the agency, the more frequent that particular tidbit happens, that they literally need somebody to, you know, get the cars maintenanced and watch videos and keep some control over the patrol division. So if you got one candidate, then that's all you got, and that's how it's going to happen. And that turns out horrendous in most cases. In the cases that I've seen, it doesn't work for your excuse to be, I ain't got anybody else, so I have to take this person. Like that's not how we should do anything. The guy that taught my SWAT schools said selection's in a never-ending process. It's every day. And, you know, I would tell in my interviews for different jobs, I tell people, like, my job is to prove to you every day why you picked me, if you end up picking me, like, every day. And we should prove that. That should be our mindset for our victims. Every day I'm proving to the people that are relying on me to help them why I'm in my position. And it seems like it's way too big an idea for a lot of people in law enforcement now. You say that to them and like their eyes glaze over, and it's kind of the end of the conversation, and you know, oh, you're fanatical, or, you know, no, I mean, that's how it has to be every day, and I don't think there's a way around it.
Man, and that's what I've always loved about you, dude, is your passion. Like, man, I've seen you get fired up, throw papers around the room, but all with good intention. Like, that was good energy, and most of it was. Sometimes it was directed because people were making stupid decisions, and you saw the stupid decisions that were being made, totally ignorant. And you know just as well as I do, look at all the things that I've highlighted on this show, just some of the body cams, the different things that these cops have done. And the public, man, they see that. Like, That's what the public's seeing. They're not going to remember, unless it happened to them directly, right? The news media, most of the time, aren't going to highlight the officer pulling the cat out of the tree or, the officer pulling the baby out of the car. Most of the time, it's all negative, 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 negative. And I try to be careful on this show, man, because, law enforcement, we have to have it. I mean, it's part of the process, and we must have it. And I don't want it to always be that I'm just, trying to highlight all the bad things. But in my experience, I feel like all the bad things, it comes out. And we just want to hurry up as quick as we can and just kick that thing under the rug so that way people will stop talking about it. People will get their minds off of it. And that, I think, the public's perception is that's what we're doing. We are kicking it under the rug. We're not changing anything. We're just trying to make it go away. We'll come out with a statement and say, hey, we're making policy changes, whatever the case may be. But it's just to get it out of sight, out of mind. It's not to truly make a change.
It's to correct the problem. It's definitely not. And, I was listening to a conversation with two true warriors. Like, we're more guardians in law enforcement, and I know that's kind of the lingo that the agencies nationwide have gone to. We're not warriors, we're guardians, and I that's a valid point. But these true warriors, these tier 1 special operators, were talking about how they would never do the job of law enforcement. They would never enter in and be a cop because, like, they were highly trained for war and for the missions that they had inside the military. The cops, these two that were talking, they both agreed that law enforcement doesn't get anywhere near the training that they need. And one of them said, like, they need to be training a third of the time. But, will the citizenry pay for that? That's left to be found, but left to be seen if that would ever happen. But it's so true. Like, the citizenry, and I used to say this all the time, the citizenry can't expect SEAL Team 6 to come and solve their crime and help them out if they don't train us like SEAL Team 6. Like, they can't expect that. That's unrealistic, and it's not going to happen. And so, between that, agencies have to do a better job training. I've seen it over and over again where the missing link is you have a young officer that wants to do right, has good moral fiber, wants to be what the citizens need him or her to be. They don't get the training. And so they're out there floundering around, making mistakes, getting in trouble with their agency for these mistakes. But it all could have been nipped in the bud with proper training. And, it rares the agency that they talk it. They don't really feel it, and they don't really put it into place.
Man, and that brought another thought to my mind. Several weeks ago, I talked about, I think it was Massachusetts. They have a database that highlights all the officers' disciplinary actions. Now, you can look at that two different ways. You could say, and the reason I bring this up is because you were talking about people doing things, making mistakes, getting in trouble, et cetera, et cetera. There's a difference between a mistake and a decision, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, a cognitive, I know this probably isn't right, but it's the easy way. It's quick. I'm going to cut this corner.
Right.
You know what I mean? But then there's a difference between making that and then, because lack of training, you make a genuine mistake, and it could be corrected with training one-on-one time. But my point to all this, shuffling problem children from one agency to another, and going back to that database, having that database, I think is pretty cool because the public can see, hey, hold these officers accountable. But the only problem with that is, right, then you've got the other side to that. Like, that's designed to be a good thing. But what the public doesn't see, and I think any cop that I bring in here and sit down across from me would agree to this, the battle that's raging within the four walls of every police headquarters in this country would make that list. You can't look at that list and know what's right or wrong. what's legit, what's not legit, because of the retaliation and the nonsense that happens within the four walls. And I know you experience that, probably more than once, just through our conversations. Our biggest battle, literally our biggest battle, we are fighting with each other. We don't even have it right within the confines of our own headquarters with one another. How in the world are we going to step outside of that and then do what we're supposed to do, provide a professional service? How do we fix that?
It starts with something so simple, and maybe every human resource person that's listening to this will understand. You have nothing without the equal application of policy and procedure. And so just because if you're liked in an agency, you can't get away with what someone else is, what a non quote unquote liked officer is it does the same thing, and you do the same thing. The application of the policy and procedure has to be equal across the board. There's all these exceptions that exist inside law enforcement, and no one talks about it. But if you're a level A officer with command staff and they like you, you're going to get away with stuff that the level C officer in the realm of liking law enforcement is not going to get away with. They're going to get hammered for it. They're going to get written up or verbally reprimanded or days off. But you're going to skate by because it wasn't quite the same. And you talk about the quickest way to kill morale is to take your policy manual, which most agencies is 300 pages, and apply that unequally across the board. You're going to make your officers hate you, and they're going to leave, or they're going to be, I don't know what to do now because I don't know what policy is going to be enforced today and which one's not, so I'm not going to do anything. And that, we see that nationally with officers just taking no proactive action for entire shifts while their neighborhoods go completely south and go
because they don't know what to do.
Well,
If you get out there and you want to make the right decision, you're either going to have problems from within. Okay, maybe you did it right in the public's eye, but then if you have somebody on a command staff or in a leadership role and they don't like you, just like you said, then you have problems from within. And then there's in contrast to that, maybe you did something the public's going to ding you for that they have a problem with because whatever reason they don't understand it. And then maybe this time your administration's okay with it. And so it's like the confusion between the two. And I told you this earlier, for me, it's a sad day. And you see it all the time. I was talking to a guy this week, which made me think about this. You got cops that'll run out in a burning house, run up to a burning car, go in a gunfight, run in a school, not knowing where the shooter's at, take them out. They will face the danger right in the face. I mean, just head on, like a warrior. But then they'll go and walk into that police station, and they're scared to death, whispering, looking around the corner, because they don't know. Their biggest fear isn't what they're doing out on the street. Their biggest fear is what's going on from within.
Oh, absolutely. I was terrified of the actions that I took that I knew to be right on the street, especially in use of force situations. I was more terrified of how it was going to be reviewed and if someone was going to find fault with it, regardless of the nature of the situation. That was the biggest problem, not the innate fear that we have walking into an unknown, the highly caustic environment of being out on the street and dealing with criminals that don't desire to go to jail. That I could do that all day. That was not a problem. I didn't have trouble sleeping after that. Like, it was not an issue. Where the trouble sleeping came from was, what's my agency going to do to me now that I was in this situation and had to handle it, to maybe stay alive or keep myself safe or save someone else. But this happened, and like, what are they going to say about it? Am I going to get in trouble for this? Are they going to try to railroad me for this? We see it. We all know officers that happened to, that they did a pretty solid job of handling a situation, but administration didn't like it. These same people, that haven't been on the street in 20 years, that are now making the decisions for for how you handled something when they haven't handled anything but a donut.
Right,
in
exactly
10 or 15
right.
years. It kills the mood for me wanting to continue to risk myself even for my community, if I got this uphill battle when I get back to the station.
And I think that's why a lot of cops are leaving. I'm not going to say, obviously, with the national issues that we've had with law enforcement, the riots, the unarmed killings, all these things. I'm not saying those aren't problems, because they are, obviously, but I will continue to say it. And like you said, they haven't handled anything in 20 years but a donut. Like, that's what these people want, though. When I say these people, I mean that's what these cities want. These city managers, these city councils, they see somebody, they see a certificate of education and maybe 10 years on the job, but that it goes back to, they don't vet that person out to who. I mean, and you dealt with this in your own agency recently, your last agency, when we talked about that, of how they vetted the candidate and how he received the job, his promotion, and these things just aren't vetted. They're not looked at closely.
Well, I mean, they're not looked at closely, and it goes back to the point that I was making about the justification for putting someone in a leadership position can't be it's all you had. I mean, what a horrible statement to make. I mean, what a melancholy environment that becomes if you're now leading men horribly, or a newly minted supervisor's leading the squad horribly because it was all the agency had. Like, that's the most ridiculous reason to put poor leadership in position that I can never even come up with. I don't know how. I don't know how an agency can live with itself, the men and women that make it up, with that being their justification. Well, I made this guy a sergeant. He wasn't ready, but we did it because he had nobody else. Like, that's horrendous. You just sacrificed. You call it kicking the can down the road. I call it sacrificing the morale and safety of your officers because you were too tired to find a better candidate. Like, that's disgusting. I don't know how else to put it.
And I also think too that I don't want to dog city councils and mayors and stuff completely, because a lot of these people have good intentions when they're trying to hire a chief.
Just have no idea.
The problem is I mean, I talked about my old chief last week, Andy Harvey. That's a guy who wrote a book, Excellence in Policing. That's a guy who has been to Lehman. That's a guy who has a master's degree. That's a guy who's been in law enforcement for 20 years, and he goes around with all this, I call it fluff. He goes around with all this fluff, and, look at me, look at my accomplishments, excellence, 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 but it's all crap. It's literally just fluff for the camera, for the crowd at city council. It's not what they don't really emulate that behind closed doors, as you saw in the video. If you watched my episode last week when I played the video, the guy went nuts in City Hall, acting like a complete fool. But that's the guy that we're asking to come lead our police departments, to come on our podcast, to come speak at our academy graduation, to
be the face of our agency.
Yes.
I mean, how else is there to put it?
And it's absurd. I don't know, man. It's frustrating. It really is.
It has to be fixed, and I don't know if we as human beings have the ability to fix it. I mean, it's so far gone, but yet, like you said, we can't live in this society without law enforcement. I mean, that would be pure chaos the moment that was done. But what is it, 48% 40% of America thinks that we should do away with law enforcement and come up with some other,
and that's crazy.
Other mechanism. Like, let's see how that works out.
No.
Like, it's not going to work out. And I'm kind of shocked that it hasn't been taken to more extreme, but they did it in Minneapolis. They tried to whittle things down, and then the citizenry, some of the same people that were demanding let law enforcement be taken out of their community, is then demanding they come back.
Yeah, you saw what happened with that.
The situation just goes out of control, right?
Yeah. So if you had to say the negative impacts that law enforcement had on you, and maybe they're still lasting, maybe they're not, I don't know. But if you had to highlight some negative impacts, what would you say?
I mean, right off the bat, it's just the incoherency of some of the agencies that I worked for, specifically the last one. Some agencies, they recognized my abilities and so put me in positions to make dynamic change and to do things that would benefit the agency because they recognized what I brought to the table, whatever they saw in me. They recognized they needed it and then allowed me to do it. But at the UT System Police in East Texas, they just refused to recognize that I had anything to offer, that they needed anything that I had to give, while putting me in charge of the training and giving me criminal investigations that occurred on the campus and different things. And so like I knew what I was doing. They knew they needed what I had, but they just refused to recognize it. And so that was just a psychological kick in the face for me.
Go ahead.
No, and then, from that carries over into when I couldn't facilitate and help facilitate the things that needed to be fixed. Egregious violations of the public trust occurred after that. I mean, horrible things happened to various victims. I'd been talking to my command staff about getting our officers training in how to handle individuals that are IDD, that have lower intellectual levels, that are disabled, like legally disabled. They've got the paperwork to prove it. They come in our floors for mental health care, and at times you have at the UT Health Science Center, you have these 2 floors where mentally ill people just commingle, and then you have hardly enough staff to handle that. Constantly problems. They called them behavioral health emergencies. They get paged out, and law enforcement would come, and the security guards would come, and all the nurses from all the floors would come to try to solve the problem and keep it on the healthcare side of things versus trying to have to get law enforcement involved. So we would stand back and call after call, multiple calls a shift to try to solve these problems. And so there was a sexual assault allegation made against a patient by another patient, and the officer that I had been preaching, we need to teach these guys how do we initially handle a sexual assault investigation with someone that is, intellectually under the age of 14. How do we do that? Where do we go? How do we handle this? What's the protocol for this? What would the investigator, which was me at the time, what would I need them to do and not do? And it was just ignored. It just wasn't done. And so we have that call one night when I'm not at work, and the officer goes and interviews a person with the cognitive ability of a 10-year-old, which is completely against protocol, right? I mean, you live that life. You know that's handled at a child advocacy center. Yeah. And, that shouldn't have happened to her. He basically interrogated her like you would, like maybe she wasn't telling the truth. Well, that's not how we handle those cases. That's not how we do that. But it was just, that for me, in the personality that I have and the way that I was raised, that's a scar that I'll never forget. I'll never forget the look on her face when I'm watching his body camera video as he basically says he thinks she's lying, where that staff doesn't agree, doesn't think that happened, and on. It's like she looked devastated as like a 10-year-old, but in the body of an adult female. It's those are the things that like I can't get over. Like I can't get over that even now, and I don't think I ever will.
And I know that kind of leads me into my next topic. I know this story just because you've told me this story recently, and I want you to tell the story. I know it's a tough story on you because of obvious reasons, but I have a picture here. I want you to talk about Nathan Lee Johns.
Absolutely.
When did that happen? What happened? Just tell the story.
Okay. Back in February of this year, 2023, the hospital that I worked at was the main mental health hospital for Texas on the kind of the public hospital side of things. And so they're private facilities, and it gets confusing. But if you have a mental health crisis in Texas, the prescribed by law, if law enforcement comes in contact, then the protocol that we follow is to take you to an emergency room, barring the circumstances or your danger to yourself or others, or your behavior is so outlandish and unsafe that it makes you a danger to yourself. That third one would be like the lady that closes her eyes and walks out into traffic because she's won't tell you she wants to kill herself, but that's a pretty good way to attempt that, right? So we meet you, we take you to the emergency room, and we have a physician evaluate you, and it's on a peace officer's warrant for mental health is generally what they call it, or an emergency detention order for mental health. And it gives up to 48 hours for the physician to kind of certify that you need to be there, get you in touch with psychiatrists if needed, if it's medication that you need, try to stabilize you, right? It's a 48-hour stabilization period. So Nathan Lee Johns came to our facility seeking mental health, and an officer did an emergency detention order. So that officer felt that he had, the totality of the circumstances indicated that Nathan Lee Johns was a risk to himself and needed to be in the emergency room to be evaluated. Well, it subsequently was discovered that Nathan Lee Johns had a nonviolent felony warrant for his arrest, which happened, and you have to put this part in context, happened all the time. People with warrants, misdemeanors or felonies, all the time would come to the facility. This happened a lot. Like it's just kind of the nature of the business. And unless it wasn't like a violent felony, or by the nature of the felony, the charge, whatever the charge was, by the nature of the charge, it tended to put other people in danger. Like if you had a murder warrant or an aggravated assault with a deadly weapon warrant, like we're probably just going to take you to jail. But for just about everything else, we would talk to the psychiatrist, let him make the call or her make the call, like this person needs to stay in the hospital for treatment, in the secure facility. They're not free to leave, obviously, because they're under that order I spoke of, or the longer order issued by a judge for mental health treatment. We didn't want to interrupt treatment for a legal matter, because obviously go to jail, you're not going to get any mental health treatment. That's one of the biggest failings that I see.
They claim
they claim that they're there, but they don't.
Let's talk about these LVN intake nurses.
Right. That's the extent of it.
Yeah.
Even if you're an RN, like you're not a psychiatrist or a psychologist, you can't prescribe medication. You can't help these people. They're not going to give them medication in jail that a lot of these people would take to live any semblance of a normal life. And then there's the whole side of that, the pharmacological interventions that maybe they work, maybe they don't. People, get on their pills. There's a bit of a rabbit trail, but they get on their medication, but it disrupts so many other aspects of their lives that they soon stop their medication, and then they're right back in mental health crisis, threatening to kill themselves or kill someone else, or destroying their homes. And then law enforcement gets involved again, and the EDO, POW process starts again, and the person gets no help. They get stabilized, they get kicked out. John Stossel did an entire study. It's fantastic. You can find it on YouTube. He did a whole show, and he talked to all these different psychiatrists, and the modicum was treat them and street them, specifically in the realm of mental health. Get them stabilized, quote unquote, and then send them back on the street as fast as possible. Part of that's because there's not enough beds, and we talk about that for a week. But anyway, Nathan Lee Johns came to the emergency room, was given an EDO. He, being mentally ill, needing mental health intervention, clearly, subsequently had an interaction with another patient, and it was a disturbance. It was on the floor. They were going to fight each other, mutual combat, like they pushed each other. So the cops got called. Me being one of them, the only one on the shift at the time. We go to the floor that he's on, secure floor. We have to 3 doors to get through. Badge yourself in. We have to leave our handguns outside, and we go to the floor and. I talked to his psychiatrist, one of the head psychiatrists for the entire hospital floor. And Nathan Lee Johns is too ill to go to jail on the warrant. If
If the psychiatrist had said he was good to go, then I might have just taken him for the warrant, because that was the protocol that we had. Like, if they were going to be released, if they were stabilized already, then they could go to jail for the legal cause. The judge's order that I take them. But this psychiatrist was like, no, he's too ill. He can't go today. He needs to stay here. So I'm like, all right, that's great. I'm glad you told me that. So no arrest is made. He stays on the floor. This conversation happened while he is so mentally ill, he's strapped into a chair, and they're force giving him medication to calm him down. He's out of control on this mental health floor. It was a common occurrence. The doctor would order it, take a big old needle, give him a shot. They go to sleep for 6, 7, 8 hours. Like, that's protocol, while they're strapped into a restraint chair to keep them from hurting themselves or others. That was Nathan Lee Johns. 36 hours later, approximately, we're called back to the floor because now he's being released. There's been a miracle. Nathan Lee Johns is no longer a danger to himself or others, and he's free to go, and we know he has this warrant, so come pick him up and take him to jail. And so I go up there.
And staff knows that. I mean,
100%
is that's kind of like on their chart, I assume, that, hey.
Well, we share it with them, like, hey, don't tell the patient this, but when your guys are done with them, when you feel that they're stabilized, their care is over here, in law enforcement, we don't have any say in that part. Call up the police department, and we'll come and take care of the job that the judges made us do with the warrant, right? I don't have a choice. I can delay it for a while for medical reasons, be it mental health or otherwise, but I got to do what the judge said. It's a felony warrant.
Right.
So I get up there. He's immediately, as soon as he sees me, he's enraged, screaming at the top of his lungs, pacing around, and bear in mind that we have myself and another officer that I was training to our facility that came from another UT system agency at the time. So I was teaching him our facility and protocol. He had about 10 years of service. Was a good officer. We got along well. And we're there. He starts screaming. Nathan Lee Johns starts screaming, hollering. He's biting himself. He's literally ripping chunks of his own flesh out of his arm, his left arm. I still see it. And then he's pulling hair.
Yeah, Zork's got some water for you, man.
Thank you.
That might help you.
He's pulling hair and teeth, or hair and skin out of his teeth.
Thanks, Zork.
That he did. He damaged himself. And this is happening in a matter of seconds. And I'm trying to help him calm down, to de-escalate the situation. Like, I was trained 27 times in the last couple of years of my career to de-escalate. And all the while he's biting himself, he's telling me that if I try to take him into custody, that he's going to make me kill him. Well, at the time, we were outside the secure floor in kind of an anteroom area. My pistol's on my hip, and the other officer had his duty weapon on as well. So I'm not going to make him come true on his promise to make me kill him. Like, I'm not going to do that. And if he starts wrestling me, we were about the same size. He was a little skinnier than me. But I wasn't going to go hands-on with him, even 2 to 1, and hope that the situation just worked out and he didn't start getting my gun, try to get my pistol, and then maybe somebody has to shoot him to prevent that from happening. So while all this is happening, the whole event lasted 1 minute 14 seconds. 1 minute 14 seconds. That's it. It's not a long thing. My conversation talking about the incident is way longer than the time I had to make a decision. So I made the decision to not rush him, not tase him. Clearly he's mentally ill. While he's biting himself, he says he's going to kill himself. He's going to make me kill him. Homicidal and suicidal ideations. He fits full tilt the Texas legal definition of needing another emergency detention order, because they've released him. But he's not well. And, if an officer encountered this on the street, he would be scooped up, taken back to the emergency room, and the process would start again. So he's making these threats continually. My body camera captured all of it. And while we're trying to de-escalate, a nurse, and so they called that emergency behavioral health code that I was talking about earlier. They called it a code BERT, Behavioral Health Emergency Response Team. So by that point, about 20 experienced psychiatric staff is there around me. So it's not like I'm just like in a vacuum. These are all medical professionals with way more education than I've got. Hearing him make these threats, seeing him biting himself, and just standing by while I'm trying to de-escalate this as I'm clearly, in the video shows it straightforward, I'm the object of his aggression. So why would I escalate it by going hands-on when I'm on a secure floor? I'm in between a secure floor surrounded by medical staff. There's no real need, and he doesn't have any weapons other than the ones that, if I lost control of my weapons, he would then have one. So a nurse lets him back onto the floor while we're having this minute 14 conversation. So now he's on the floor. Well, I had asked to speak to his psychiatrist who wasn't at the hospital at this time. So some staff remind me that he's on the phone. He's like, hey, this doctor is here and wants to, you can talk to him. So I go back and I'm like, why are we releasing this guy? Like, this is what just happened. And come to find out, the only reason, the first reason that this psychiatrist, this highly trained medical professional, the only reason he gave me that he was releasing him was because he was scared of him. Those are the doctor's words. I'm scared of him. I'm afraid he's going to hurt me if I leave him on the floor. So Nathan Lee Johns is going to jail because the doctor can't deal with an extremely psychotic patient. That's it. That's it in a nutshell. Well, I don't know what the fix is for that, as I'm not in medicine, but that can't be the reason why you turn somebody that's sick away. It makes no sense to me at all. Still doesn't to this day. So while I'm trying to talk to the psychiatrist, come to find out, he has been able to access the ceiling. He's pushed the non-secure acoustical ceiling tiles out of the way and climbed into the rafters, basically between floors. It's not a secure floor. It's the opposite of that.
So he could climb in the ceiling, and if he wanted to, just find some way out. Obviously.
Well, we wondered about that once because no one told us. I'd been there 2 years at this point at this agency, and no one told me there wasn't a secure floor. That it was like, those are just acoustical tiles. This isn't a secure area. So he's up there now. He won't come down. So we rush in. I'm trying to talk him down. You know this about me. I'm a pretty good negotiator when it comes to de-escalating people. I just have a knack for it.
And you're really good at mental health stuff too. Not only you're passionate about it, because there is a crisis. In this country, there's a crisis, and so always knew you to be passionate about mental health. So not being there and hearing each other's story, in my mind, I'm just kind of picturing how you were. You were always sincere about it. And so I'm sure that's exactly what you were doing.
I think if you had been there, you would have known that this person is in crisis. They don't need the strong arm of law enforcement. They need compassion and control. And we don't want anybody to get hurt, but this person doesn't need to go to jail. Like the warrant was not enough 36 hours ago. Well, all of a sudden it's enough to take him off this floor where he needed the treatment. Clearly he needed the treatment. Like if I'd met this situation on the street, I would have taken him for emergency medical treatment, like hands down, no questions asked, based off of his behavior, which is the standard that we go by, right? So anyway, he's in the ceiling. He takes his shirt. He had a shirt, a long sleeve shirt. He ties it around his neck, like semi in a noose, and then ties it to a pipe in the ceiling, which he never should have been able to access. So now he's in the ceiling with a ligature around his neck and tied to a pipe, and so now it's like a barricaded person. It's the equivalent of him having a knife to his neck. Well, in the ceiling, unwittingly, I guess, a maintenance man had left a pair of pliers, standard 12-inch blunt nose pliers. Well, he got a hold of those. First, he tried to make me think it was a knife. Tried to tell me that he had like a razor blade or something because he wanted me to hurt him. He wanted me to kill him. Thinking back, that's what he wanted. And so he starts pinching himself with the pliers, like pinching himself down till he's bleeding, like causing himself horrendous trauma. And I get him to stop that with conversation. Well, at this point, my sergeant arrives. His name is Stuart Alexander. He arrived. Now he's a lieutenant. This goes to the heart of what you talk about on your podcast here. He arrives. I'm building rapport with this guy. He's been in the ceiling probably 15 minutes, plus or minus. And he starts hollering out that when more officers get here, we're going to get up in the ceiling and get him and grab him down, bearing in mind that the sergeant now knows he's got a noose around his neck. And he's continuing self-harm. We had the biting in the beginning, and now he's brutalizing himself with a pair of pliers. Completely, that behavior by the supervisor completely undoes the work that I had put in the 15 or 20 minutes that I'd been talking to this man. Now he's like, I'm not going back to jail. I'm not going back to jail. You guys aren't going to get me.
So he said something to him?
Well, he started hollering at me, telling me the plan, the tactical plan that we were going to use while I'm negotiating with the man in the ceiling like 3 feet away. 3 feet away and a ceiling about this tall. So obviously the Nathan hears all of this and freaks out. I mean, just goes, everything I tried to do is now undone. And you guys are going to come get me? You guys are going to come and get me now? And I'm like, no. Like I can't believe my sergeant, makes way more money than me, is supposed to be the leader of the shift, has no idea that you don't tell the person the plan. Like, nobody, like, man. We didn't do that when I was on tactical teams. Like, we didn't let the house know that we were about to hit it. Like, hey, we're coming, guys. Like, you don't do that. It's the wrong thing to do. But this man had zero training, and that's what he thought was he lost his cool, and he had no training to fall back on, and he was freaking out because this is happening, and he's at work, and he's got to deal with this now, and he's got to answer for this, to some degree. So he loses all touch with reality, and everything that we're supposed to do goes out the window. And he's doing that. I'm still trying to talk Nathan down. Well, he drags the ladder over. The sergeant drags the ladder over. He's still up. The noose ligature is still around his neck. He's still holding the pliers. And this goes on for just a short amount of time. Well, Nathan jumps with the noose around his neck. And all the while, ceiling tiles, these horrible old ceiling tiles have fallen, like have been moved out of the way. And there's a mess now. And, well, Nathan jumps. And the shirt pulls tight around his neck, really tight, so tight that we subsequently had to cut it off of his neck with shears, with safety shears. We couldn't undo the knot. But it rips because it's just a T-shirt. Nathan didn't know that. Like, there's no way he didn't think that shirt would hold. It was an effort to kill himself. I believe that to this day. The facts that I have in my mind and the video that replays over and over in my subconscious tells me that he was trying to go through with the suicide. But the shirt ripped. So he hit the ground unconscious. It jerked him so hard that he was not awake when he was laying on the ground, on the floor of this secure floor, this secure hospital floor. And so we cut it off of him. We put him in a restraint chair and take him to the emergency room and get him evaluated, that was proper protocol. And while I'm there, I'm instructed, I'm not asked, as a veteran police officer. At the time I had about 15 years on. I wasn't asked what if I had a plan for this or what needed to be done. I was instructed to charge him with everything possible. So the felony warrant, the criminal mischief for the ceiling tiles. Even though he didn't necessarily destroy the tiles, it was my sergeant and a security officer that had pulled the tiles down, which was probably the right thing to do so we could see him and he wasn't hiding from us. But Nathan didn't destroy those tiles.
But
we did.
But we're going to charge a guy who's in having a mental health episode. We're going to stack charges on him. For what reason?
I don't know. I mean, that goes back to failing justice, completely failing. Like, why would we do that? The guy already has a felony warrant. Like, it was for evading. He got away in his vehicle. Dangerous, shouldn't happen. Not endorsing it. He didn't hurt anybody. He didn't. That wasn't the charge. He didn't. He maybe the pursuit was called off. Who knows? I don't know the details of that. But he got away, got a warrant, and then he's at the hospital for mental health treatment. Which from what I've been detailing in this long story, he needed the mental health treatment. Like, maybe that's why he ran from the police. I don't know. Supposition on my part, but it's kind of obvious. So I stack all these charges on him. Resisting arrest. I had to put that on him, too, a wonderful misdemeanor.
Oh, my gosh.
The heavy charge of resisting arrest, even though, he didn't assault me. Threatened to, but he didn't do it. And criminal mischief and the warrant. And so I take him to the Smith County Jail and book him in. The guy is still if I had met him on the street and the prior events had not happened, I would have evaluated him for a mental health order. I would not have taken him to jail. He would have had to commit a violent felony for him to go to jail.
The only reason he went to jail was because you had an order from the rank above you to
all the way. No, the sergeant and the assistant chief. That was the rank structure that we had at the time. I was ordered to do that, and I said like, whoa! Like I even protested. Why are we sticking all these charges on him? Like, you don't charge the burglar with kicking the front door with criminal mischief and burglary of a habitation. It's just burglary of a hab. It's a high felony. It is what it is. But anyway, so he gets booked into jail without incident. He gets put, in the we call them turtle suits, right? The schmuck. When you're suicidal. They knew he was suicidal. I told them he was extremely suicidal. And the Smith County Jail allowed him in, took him into their facility. And I'm like, wow, this is great. Well, come to find out, I'm put under internal affairs investigation for the minute and 14 seconds that I didn't escalate the situation into a brawl on the floor. I was reverting back to your de-escalation training that the agency made me take over and over again as just part of the
mental
Texas
health
law.
you got put under internal affairs for it,
and the fact that I'm a mental health peace officer and I have a bachelor's degree in psychology. So like I'm not just coming up with this stuff. Like I don't know. I have a little bit of background in this. Plus, at the time, I had done hundreds and hundreds of mental health orders to get people treatment that needed it, both at the county and Gladewater Police Department. I would come out at night to help the officers with these calls.
Remember.
And so it's like I have some experience with this.
I've known a lot of mental health peace officers through my career. Some of them just like the title because it sounded cool, but man, and I'm not just here saying this because you're in front of me, dude, but I still tell people this day, like, I mean, you were like the guy that I've met in this entire career, the one police officer that, I mean, like you're so knowledgeable on that. And if I had questions, you were always the guy to call, and that's who all the other officers call. So, I mean, because you took interest in it, and that's like you said, that's what your degree's in, and so I would have not doubted you in that situation personally.
Right. Well, and my agency knew my background as well. Like this wasn't like a secret or something that new happened. And I by no means was I a rookie at 15 years. But so. He's in the facility. I'm now under investigation, which drug on and on and on and on, and is one of the main reasons why I put in my 2 weeks notice and left the agency. But to jump back, so 7-8 days later, I get a KLTV alert on the local news station. I get a news alert. It says Smith County had a inmate death, in custody death, and the Rangers are investigating. So, being the former investigator, lieutenant of investigators that I was, I naturally wanted to see who it was. And immediately I recognized it as Nathan Lee Johns. He's dead. And
almighty, man.
They released enough information that in the beginning, and I guess it had been about a day before they reported it, that they had been investigating this death. But he had smuggled in an electrical cord, like an extension cord that came from an inmate phone. And, Smith County just built a nice new facility, so I'm not even sure how that happened. But he was so dedicated to the idea of killing himself, just like he told me in the incident, just like he made abundantly clear to my sergeant and to myself and to others that he was going to kill himself, that he was not going to go back to jail. The way he demonstrated his behavior, the fact that he was in a mental health hospital before all of this happened, receiving treatment for self-destructive threats and comments. He was so dedicated to that idea that he smuggled this cord in. He took random debris, paper, trash, any kind of junk he could find, and he packed the cylinder, the locking cylinder on the cell door, so that it could not be opened without a massive effort by staff. And he hung himself as still a young man. He hung himself, and we did nothing about it. The mental health system did not do its job, did not live up to its, first do no harm for the doctor's, oath. We as law enforcement did not do what we needed to do for this this person, was he the best person on the earth? No. He had an extensive criminal history. Nothing violent, but thefts and drug use. Things that appear to be common, in my experience, with people that suffer from mental illnesses. And we failed him. We failed him utterly, and now he's dead.
Well, let me show a picture of him right quick. So that's Nathan Lee Johns there. I believe that's from his obituary. And man, what most people would say, I guarantee you there may be a cop listening to this show right now that says, well, who gives a shit? He was a POS, right? That's the common response. Like, I've heard that conversation so many times. I'll be quite honest with you, dude. When I was earlier in my career, I was a part of those conversations. Because these things are not, they're not taught. The training that we receive to handle these kinds of things, it's mandated. We got to hurry up. I've said this before. Guys have been working the night before. Guys got to work that night. We got to hurry up, get this done, get this done, get this done. We'll just give you the answers. There's no true education and training that comes when we go to these classes. You honestly, man, like, you're rare in the fact that you care about this stuff. I've met few people in my career that truly care about it, and it just blows my mind that you're sitting there reverting back to your training and education. You take somebody to jail who doesn't, and we could talk about this all night, the mental health crisis. What do we do? That's a whole nother, I don't think we'll have time for it tonight, but he didn't need to go to jail.
Well, I mean, not when 36 hours prior he was too sick to go for the warrant, which was why I was there to arrest him 36 hours in the future. I just, and the odds are his family doesn't know this stuff. Like the mom and the brother that I saw at a distance coming to pick up his belongings that stayed at the hospital when he was going to jail. They don't know. Nobody told him that he was there for treatment, and this could have completely been avoided, at least postponed until he was further evaluated because of his outlandish behavior and kept at the hospital to receive what he needed, what he was there for. And it's, talk about the things in this profession that scar you, that you can't get away from. This is right up there with a lot of abused children that I've been able to intercede for, and I've had to see their injuries and hear them talk in child advocacy center interviews. Things that once heard cannot be unheard or left behind. And this man that was equal, let's just start from the premise that he's equal to us under the Constitution. We are no more, no less than he is in the eyes of our government. Let's not even talk about God and the whole Christian side of things, which that's what I try to be every day. He deserved the best that we could give him. He was the destitute and the person that needed help from his fellow man, and he didn't get it. And not just any fellow man, right? Like, I'm not asking somebody on the street to do Nathan John's well.
You're literally
getting paid to do it.
Right. You're in a position to where you could help him.
We should have helped him.
You should have helped him, but then you have a supervisor, sergeant, who, these are the people we're putting in charge, right?
And so, earlier in this cast with you, I talked about the only person to get promoted because I had to pick this guy because it was all there was. That's the supervisor. That's who that story came from and who it's tied to. The chief administrative officer told me that I promoted him because he was all there was. And now you can chalk up all there was to a man's dead. And he had a hand in it by his complete and utter ineptitude.
Complete failure on our part as law enforcement. So I'm curious.
We're so bad. Just one more thing. We're so bad at monitoring ourselves and doing the right thing in law enforcement, at least in a lot of instances, that this person has subsequently been promoted to lieutenant at the third largest state agency in Texas, even after this horrendous event that he was part of. And all of this had been made known to command staff. I tried to reach out to Austin, to the director's office, and no one would talk to me. I had a brief conversation with an assistant director, and he told me to send an email. I sent the email and have never heard back. Never heard.
Swept it under the rug.
It's gone, and a promotion ensued after that.
I have so many questions right now. What I'm gonna try to get to them to make sense of it. What happened with your internal affairs investigation?
It drug on and drug on and drug on, and I came to the realization through much blood, sweat, tears, and prayer that this is no longer the profession that I needed to be in, that I was no longer fulfilling the role I thought that I had been called to fulfill, especially, at least not at that agency. And so at 15 years and 2 months, I left law enforcement. And like we said in the beginning, I'm in the private sector now. And I didn't necessarily want to leave. I didn't feel like I had a choice. And I'll have a wife and a child and family that needs me. And being in a situation like that where doing the right thing is then penalized.
Was this a, hey, resign or get fired type situation?
Not
like
at
what,
all.
Like what happened?
So I put in my 2 weeks notice. I was in contact with an association attorney just to help guide me through the situation. And like most officers do, when if they pay their dues, then they can call an attorney for advice. And I told him that told my attorney that I was putting in notice, and I was concerned about, are they going to say they're going to try to mess with my TCOL certificate and say that I, was under investigation, discharge, dishonorable discharge. But after all of that,
oh yeah, the good old honorable, dishonorable general BS.
Yep. And after all of that,
love it.
After putting me for weeks under the scrutiny of an investigation, even though I was fully open under Garrity, I met and told the entire story to this assistant chief that has almost no experience. He's one of the poorest excuses for a leader that I've ever seen. And again, this is what we do to ourselves in law enforcement. We pick the worst possible candidate and we put them in positions of ultimate power inside the agency. And it's nothing but disgusting. I got an honorable discharge, even though I left and the investigation had still not concluded multiple weeks after this incident occurred. And
did you have any other?
That tells you, no. About a year before that, I was given a merit award, a meritorious service award, because I solved a series of smash and grab burglaries that had been done by juveniles out of Little Rock, Arkansas. And my investigative ability, just a gift from the Lord, allowed me to solve that case. And so I got an award out of Austin for my service.
And then
a year
later, you're under internal
clearly
affairs.
I have no idea what I'm doing. Yeah, especially not in the realm of my degree. Like I don't know what I'm doing.
So now, in that 2 weeks period of time, because I know how that can be stressful. Obviously, you had to get an attorney involved. I've been there. I've been in those investigations, BS investigations. What it boils down to is several things. Either they're nitpicking or they just don't like you. Could be a wide range of things. But during that 2 weeks notice, did you have anything else come up during that? I say 2 weeks notice. During 2 weeks notice, internal affairs investigation. That
Right.
whole period of time, did you have anything else that you were dealing with during that time?
So it's the second to the last day in March, the first couple of weeks of March, and I'm second to the last day on shift. I put in my full 2 weeks notice. If I give my word, I'll give you 2 weeks, and I'm honorable, man. I'm going to do it. So it's the second day. I could have called in sick. I could have called in anything I wanted to and not had to come to work, but I didn't. I came in, and I get a call to the emergency room before I'm actually on shift. Like shift started at 7 o'clock. We would clock in and be ready by 6:53. It was just kind of the way that worked. I get a call to the emergency room that there's a disturbance and a criminal trespass. A patient doesn't want to leave. This happened regularly at UT. It found it to be disgusting most of the time. A lot of times they were homeless people that had nowhere else to go. We were turning them loose, in cold weather, hot weather. Like, we didn't really care. They didn't care. I cared. Tried to do whatever I could for folks. Gave a lot of courtesy transports that weren't necessarily policy violations, but somebody probably would have been mad that I was driving these indigent people all over town because there's no place to go with them.
Let's just be frank. Piss on policy sometimes, right? Sometimes you have to say piss on policy instead of going by the letter. of the law and of policy. Sometimes you have to operate in the spirit, because
one day I'm going to have to answer for the decisions I
There you
made
go.
on this earth, and I'm not going to get the pass that it was policy that I did it, that I screwed this person over.
right.
So
Sorry, that was
Nope.
just a quick thought that I had to interject there.
it's valid. So anyway, I get the call. I get to the emergency room. I talk to this gentleman. Yet another case where right off the bat, if I had met this person anywhere other than a hospital, I would have evaluated him for a mental health crisis. He feels that he wasn't treated properly in the emergency room. We heard that a lot. Some of it was valid. Some
Listen,
of it wasn't.
Sorry, not to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
Do you remember that wreck I had?
Yes.
271 and 155.
Yep.
Right there in front of that UT hospital.
That's where
I was on duty. I was on my way home. Full days of work. I was in my city vehicle. I had a gun and a badge on. Lady runs the light. I T-bone her. She dies right there. I mean, it was a bad wreck, dude. Real bad. And Chief Fine, he was like, I feel like there's a hospital right here. You need to go in here and you need to get evaluated.
Sure.
And I was like, no, I'm fine. Like, of course, he's like, you need to go. Like, I'm basically telling you to go. So I went in there.
Yeah.
And again, dude, I got cuts, scrapes, complete and utter shock. My wife at the time, she drives me, the 100 yards to that hospital. I walk in. I'm getting off track here, but
no, this is valid.
I go up there, and literally, man, I walk in. I said, "Hey, look out the window. You see that that crash team out there working that fatality accident? Like, I was involved in that accident. My chief said I need to come in here. I need to get looked at." They look at me and they say, all right, we'll triage you. They triage me. I'm sitting there, 10, 15 minutes later, they come back out there. All right, let's go to the back. And they look at me and they say, you're going to have to take that gun off. I'm like, what? Like I have a gun and a badge on, right? I'm still in like a suit, tie, whatever. They're like, that you can't take that back here in our emergency room. And I was like, what do you mean I can't take it? But I said, lady, I was just involved in a fatality accident. Yeah. The only reason I'm not wearing it just like for fun because I want to be a cowboy.
Like
shorts
and sandals,
free
Whataburger.
I literally just left work.
Yeah.
And I had this accident. I'm like, you're telling me you're going to refuse to treat me if I don't take my gun off? And she says, yeah, we can't. I said, well, this isn't the place for me, dude. And I walked out. Yeah. And what's crazy about that story, just real quick before I let you carry on, the reason I bring it up is because you talk about them being treated poorly. If they're going to treat a cop like that, my God, how are they treating everybody else? So about a month later, I get a bill in the mail, like $1,500 bill for their little triage. I say, oh, hell no, man. I take that bill.
Anyway, right?
Yes, I take that bill in person. I go to that hospital. I said, you guys are nuts if you think I'm paying this. And I tell them kind of what happened. And they ended up making it right. They dismissed the bill. But that's that UT hospital, the very one that you worked at. And I just had to tell that story because I literally believe what you're telling me. I can't imagine how these people get treated.
By no means was what you just relayed a one-off situation. That was standard operating procedure.
Yeah.
And, to be fair, UT sold the business side of their hospitals to different management companies. And I'm trying to remember the name of this management company, but a lot of those calls, that was a policy decision that would have come, and it was the wrong policy decision because we never required that. If you're an officer with a badge, you get to be armed, like on duty or off duty. Like you can't dictate to that. But anyway, so I get the call that he's super upset. I de-escalate him. I don't have to arrest this man. I don't have to put my hands on this man. I don't have to do anything to him. I get him outside, and I talk him down. Everything's fine. I get him to agree to let me drive him maybe 8 miles, 12 miles to the county mental health provider, which is in Smith County and some surrounding counties. It's the Andrews Center. I'm like, he's telling me medical staff said, hey, we're not going to treat you. You can go outpatient to the Andrews Center. Well, this is like 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock in the morning. They're not open. They're not going to be open for a couple hours. And it's still cold outside this morning. And he has no way to get 12 miles to the Andrews Center. So he's like going to start a hike, I guess, while he's in mental health crisis. He's telling me, I'm afraid if I don't get some help, I'm going to hurt myself or someone else. Like, he's saying this to me. Maybe it's a ploy, maybe not. Like, all the training that I've got, that you've got in de-escalation and mental health, and you believe people when they say things like that, because the moment you don't believe them, then bad things happen.
Absolutely.
So you just believe him. And he's saying this. He's told this to medical staff, and they just blew it off. All the way up to the physician that was present, that had to sign off on all this. But anyway, I get him to get in the front seat of my car. I drove an old Crown Vic. This is 2023. I'm in a 2011 Crown Vic. Nobody else wanted to drive it, so I kind of got the car to myself, which was fine. Didn't have a cage, so I took a play out of Texas DPS, and I put him in the front seat next to me, buckled him in. He let me pat him down. I checked his bag, put his bag in the trunk, like, we're safe as I can be, safe as he can be. So I'm going to drive him to the Andrews Center. Well, the assistant chief. He's now my direct supervisor because of the.
Is this the same guy from?
Yes.
From the floor.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, Bradley Sandifer is his name, and he gets on the radio and then starts telling me that I can't do this courtesy transport. I've got another call. I don't know about another call for service. There's been no radio traffic about it from dispatch. I'm like, well, he's in the car already. I usually don't have to ask permission to just run this guy, 10 minutes away to solve our problem and help him all in the same swoop, same moment of time. So he goes back and forth with me on the radio. I'm respectful, like we're on the radio of all places. So I call him on my phone because he's my supervisor at the time, as well as the assistant chief of the agency. And I explain the situation. And he begins getting more and more like aggressive with me. Bearing in mind, I still have 2 days left with the agency before I'm no longer a UT police officer. And he tells me that I will not be giving him a courtesy transport, and I'm to issue him a criminal trespass and make him leave the property or whatever, but then go handle this other call. So I'm going to CT somebody, but leave him on the property because, like, I'm going to trust that he's going to walk 700 yards off of our campus. Like, are you kidding me? That's a policy. That's a protocol violation all day long. You can't CT somebody and leave them on the property.
Right.
Bear in mind, there's no other officers there. It's just me. So I try to explain this to the assistant chief, who has zero understanding of what's happening in this call because he's across town. He has no idea what's happening. Very little radio traffic about this because I had it handled, other than, like, I'm on scene. I'm going to give this guy courtesy transport. Nobody knew what transpired. So he starts I'm like, well, I can't issue him. I can do the criminal trespass, but I'm like, you want me to leave him on the property? He was like, no, don't leave him on the property. Don't do that. Arrest him for criminal trespass. And I'm like, but he's not criminal trespassing. He's sitting in my car. He's completely agreed to let me drive him off property. Like, we're golden. Like, this is the perfect solution to this. No criminal action, no law enforcement action has to be taken here. He's letting me drive him off the property, solve our problem. So he's like, you will arrest him. And I'm like, sir, I can't. I was like, I believe I'm the officer on scene here, a senior officer at that, and I'm explaining to you that there's no crime now. Like, there's no crime. There wasn't a crime to begin with. This was a medical patient, 15 minutes ago. This was a paying customer, basically. Even if he was indigent, somebody's going to pay for his treatment. He was here to receive treatment, and now you want me to arrest him for criminal trespass after he already left? So through this back, he's like, you will arrest him. I'm ordering you to arrest him. And I'm like, sir, I'm not going to do that. Like, you're demanding I violate this man's civil rights for no cause.
Oh my goodness!
You really want to do that?
And this is like the day before you leave.
The day before I'm done with the agency. And I'm just there to cover a shift because they would have had no one to work that day if I hadn't come in to work. I could have done like so many other officers that I know, and when they're leaving, they call in sick, they take vacation, like they're not around. What are they going to do to you, right? I could have been that guy.
Yeah.
But I wasn't. And I'm trying to solve this problem. So I tell him this again, and he starts screaming that he's going to give me a dishonorable discharge, and that I'm to be in his office on Wednesday, which Wednesday was my last day. Like, I was done with the agency Wednesday. It actually was the day after my last day. It was my first off day, so I wouldn't have been at the agency anyway. It would have just been my last day of the work week, off for the week. And So he starts just screaming at me. It's on speakerphone. My body camera is recording this entire interaction. So like there's unless they've deleted it, which I don't put it past them, there's a complete record of this, so nobody has to take my word for it. A Freedom of Information request to the University of Texas in Austin would get you this data.
Which I've just, so we're clear, I've already submitted that.
Right. Well, anybody else wants to submit it.
Yeah, no.
But
so he's threatening you. Like
he's
this guy's threatening that if you don't arrest this man for a made-up offense that doesn't exist and take him to Smith County Jail, he's going to then in turn give you a dishonorable discharge for employment on your state document.
Yes, which would have been a lie because I was at no point
tampering with government documents.
Was I disrespectful? Like I was not insubordinate. I was voicing concern that you're wanting me to do something illegal. I'm not allowed. Subsequently, my attorney was like, if you had done that, you would have been guilty of the same thing he was ordering you to do. You have to refuse unlawful orders. You have a duty to do that. This was unlawful. And on top of all that, so like this is on speakerphone. My body camera is recording this conversation kind of inadvertently. That wasn't the plan, but my body camera's on. I'm doing a transport. Mm-hmm. We're not in the parking lot of the ER anymore. We're driving across campus when this phone call took place. So my body camera just picked this up as I'm on the phone with this assistant chief, and he's screaming at me. Well, the guy thinks I'm going to arrest him.
Oh, my gosh.
This man who is in mental health crisis, whether the hospital believed it or not.
And now he's in your front seat while you're
right
driving.
Next to me. He starts crying because he thinks I'm going to put him in jail. Like he starts bawling, and I'm like, that's not going to happen, man. Don't worry about that. Like, so I couldn't take him all the way to the Andrews Center. I drove him to a local restaurant. He started to calm down. I thought he would be okay. I bought him breakfast and left him. Not at the Andrews Center. He still had about 8 miles to go to the Andrews Center. And then I went back to my agency, and he told me to go home. So during that conversation, I was told just to leave, just go home. So I took all my stuff and left for no reason. And on top of all this, in the environment and law enforcement is in right now, it said no bearing to me. I was trying to help this person, but it was a person of color. So I'm ordered to violate the civil rights of a person of color by an out-of-control assistant police chief with little experience in true leadership or law enforcement who's making me do that.
It's just
trying to make me do that.
Strong-arm leadership. Like, you're going to do what I say. I don't give a crap. At that point, he lost all emotional intelligence. Like, he was literally – I mean, he was just so angry at the fact that you weren't doing what he said to do. Yeah. And then he just comes up with, oh, go ahead and arrest him then. And then he gets pissed off about that because
I can't do that. Like he's not criminal trespassing.
And this guy's still as assistant chief.
He still is. Yeah, and had a hand in promoting the Sergeant Alexander to lieutenant.
That's real good.
And we wonder, and we wonder why a huge chunk of our society thinks law enforcement is bad, all bad, even though that's not true.
And just think
they think that because like stories like this, and you and I both know that we have dozens of other more stories, some less. Most of them less severe than this, but just as bad and just as ridiculous. And that's what we're supposed to live with. And I couldn't do it anymore.
And so you had already put, yikes, man. So you'd already put your 2 weeks in. This happened during your 2 weeks. And then I'm curious, did you get honorable, dishonorable? Like what happened with that?
Honorable. They rushed. They didn't even close the investigation. They just stopped it and gave me an honorable discharge.
I'm sure every bit of policy on body camera retention, because you retain those for if it's a case, it's like this certain period of time. If it's not, if it's just a test or whatever, I'm sure all policy on body camera retention went out the window. Because I don't know this obviously, but if he's doing that, why wouldn't he delete that body cam footage? That where you have him on speaker and he's sitting there threatening you,
hollering, screaming,
to tamper with a government document if you don't make an illegal arrest. Yep. And these are the guys. This is a chief, like somebody assistant chief who should know. Wow. Yeah,
like the frontline leader of the organization doesn't have a clue what a criminal trespass is. I mean, either he doesn't know what a criminal trespass is, and that wasn't the case, or this was on purpose and he didn't care. Like, there's how many other options can you come up with?
While you were in an internal affairs investigation over a man, like, let's be honest, that they facilitated his death.
Absolutely.
I mean, let's just put that in words of what it is.
We were the last law enforcement agency other than the housing agency to be with Nathan Johns until he died.
Holy hell, man! Like I don't even know what to say, man, about this.
And Austin didn't care. the University of Texas System Police, the Office of the Director of Police.
And you know what?
Didn't even care to talk to me. Like, I was leaving. Like, there's nothing more I needed from them. I wasn't like wrangling for a promotion. I had already left the agency, and they didn't have the decency just to hear me out. And I even filed a complaint with HR because we didn't talk about this, but quickly, I had to do a use of force report, which for those folks, that aren't in law enforcement, they might not really know what that is. But anytime you use force in law enforcement against a suspect, you have to document it specifically in a separate report. Like, that's the way things have gone now. And it's actually fine because you just put the details of the use of force and what caused you to do that. Well, Stuart Alexander, I wrote my use of force report. It was detailed because a lot had happened, and the man tried to hang himself in front of us. He rewrote my use of force report in a Word document and then called me down and said, take all this out. And I put stuff in there that was relevant about the doctor, about the psychiatrist, not wanting him to go to jail, and then 36 hours prior put me in a situation to have to arrest him. All that stuff was in the use of force report because it was vitally pertinent to the entire incident. He took all that out of my report, rewrote it, highlighted it in yellow. I still have the document. And then told me, and I was like, man, I don't agree with this. Like, with all due respect, I don't agree with this. Like, you're telling me to take out facts out of my report, which that's wrong. Like, what are you doing? I didn't have the words for it because it's never happened to me before in 15 years. No one had ever demanded I change my narrative. He goes, well, if you don't want to do it, I'll do it, and I'll submit it as a supervisor. I'm like, wow, bro, like, you can't do that. And so I tried to file this with Human Resources for the University of Texas and with the Office of the Director. All of this was in my emails, and no one would even talk to me about it. And you talk about sweeping stuff under the rug, like, they don't even bother to touch the broom anymore. They just ignore it. And I feel for the good officers, the one or two that are good that were there. I feel for them. I feel for the patients that are going to get taken there by law enforcement to this hospital and be treated the same way and be put in the same just uncaring situation when they're some of the weak. They are some of the most what is the word for it? Like children.
They're vulnerable.
The most vulnerable, yeah, that's the word. Population are those people that are truly mentally ill that really need help. And we're going to treat them that way? And we're going to let one die and do nothing about it? Like, there should have been a top-down review. Austin should have sent investigators. They have this whole directorate of, they call them inspectors, that should have reviewed every process associated with this death and evaluated it and tried to make it better that this never happens again. And they didn't. They ignored all of it. And they left everybody in position and promoted one that had a hand in this debacle. And I'll never get over it.
That is so, man, and like you said, the problem with this entire thing is that's just one story of God knows how many, and I want to say, I commend you in a lot of areas, handling that, standing your ground, because just think had that been a rookie officer, somebody who'd not been on the street very long, what in the world would they have done? Would they have taken that black man to Smith County and booked him for a charge that there was no offense?
There was. I mean, it would have been.
That's a real possibility that could have happened if it wasn't somebody like you who knew better and who stood up for the Constitution and the laws that we raised our right hand and said, hey, I will defend. And that's what you were doing. You were defending it, and then by defending that, you were getting threatened.
Yeah. To
screw your employment for if in the future you wanted to get back in, and that's what happened to me at Palestine. Exactly what happened to me, man.
Well, I can't imagine, though it's honorable, I'm quite certain they wouldn't give me
a
good recommendation.
The backdoor conversations. Yeah. If I'm at an agency, and I wanted to hire you at my agency, and I'm in charge of doing that, you put in an application, I drive down to that facility and meet with that chief and say, I want to see his file. He'll hand me the file, and then I'll say, these are those off the rails conversation that nobody hears about.
No documentation.
Tell me about Gillen. Well, off the record, was sitting there with donut all over his uniform, just acting like a complete idiot, and there's no telling what he would say about you.
Wouldn't be good.
And that's what happened to me when I went to apply at Bullard PD.
Yep.
Everybody in Palestine, one of the lieutenant at Bullard knew some of the guys in Palestine. He drove over there. They had a little sit-down conversation in the office about how terrible of a person I am, and found something in my file that wasn't there when I left. And these are the people that are leading our freaking agency, and it just pisses me off. I'm getting so fired up right now. This is utterly ridiculous and absurd. And what do we do about it? Because you sit there and you made the call. You called Austin. I may send a clip of this to Austin and let them hear this, because I don't think they'd want this to get out, but it's out now. But that's what it's going to take. It's going to take people who are bold, who have experienced this kind of thing, to stand up. And just think of the dozens and hundreds, actually, maybe even thousands of law enforcement officers that still wear a badge today that have experienced this kind of crap, but they can't say anything because they'll lose their job.
Absolutely.
Then they can't feed their family.
Yep. It is such a, we talked in the beginning about the problems with getting recruits and getting new officers. It's the worst it's ever been. And so agencies, whether it's a good idea or a bad idea, if you got a shift and you need a body for the shift, and all you can get is D1, the bottom of the barrel officers, then you're going to hire those people, whether it's a good choice or not. And then it's going to have bad results in a lot of situations, in a lot of cases. It's going to have horrible unintended consequences, and then the public's going to lose trust, and it's going to be a vicious cycle of look at how bad law enforcement is, and look at these horrible things that they've done, and how they don't care about us. They don't handle our call because we're hiring poor while they're running off the good officers that they've got.
Absolutely.
There was another officer that worked there. He had 10 years with UT System Police, and he was at the university in Tyler. They did everything. He was on the statewide special response team. He was highly trained, promoted to this position. They did everything. This administration, the ones that's the university now, Chief Metters and then this Assistant Chief Sandifer, they did everything in their power to run him off while they were struggling to hire anyone. So I left. This officer left. He found another job with another agency in the Tyler area. He's so happy to be there now and away from that. A tenured sergeant left, and they can't hire anyone. They can't get these positions back. But because of this leadership, those two men in power, they have ruined the agency. And the UT System Police in Tyler has a horrible reputation. It's all bad. And the chief that I worked for, he during the merger that occurred, he's the one that hired me. He won Chief of the Year out of all 13 chiefs the year before. They put him out to pasture and took his agency away, combined them in a merger between UT Tyler Police and UT Health Science Center Police, put them together, took it away from him, and gave him like a title, maybe a little pay bump. I'm sure he was kind of happy about it, but then put this man that had already destroyed the department. He lost all his officers a couple of years back, this Chief Metters. Ran them all off.
I got a story about Chief Metters. We ain't got time for it tonight, though.
We were having to go cover their campus before we were the same agency, when we were two separate agencies. We were going over to cover their campus because they had no officers.
I didn't know they merged them.
So
UT, the school, is now part of
Health Science
the Health Science Center.
Yeah. So it's
they have one chief, which is
Metters.
Wow.
Yep. And he ran off all of his help. All of his officers left him, all but a couple. They had no people. So then he gets back up to staffing. And this all happened on his watch. Like, the buck has to stop with the chief. And so if all your people leave, somebody needs to investigate why that happened. And they didn't do it. And then they gave him a promotion as a chief to be over both campuses. To be over the campus where I worked, the Health Science Center, and to be over UT where he was. So like, if you do horrible in this profession, you get more responsibility. I mean, that's all that can be deduced from this situation.
Ladies and gentlemen, is the problem. Hear this story. Hear the stories of everybody that I've brought in, and just think of, I mean, I'm looking at my phone right now, and I got all kinds of cops texting me because they're watching this, and they were telling me, I don't know what some of these say. Usually when I get done with these shows, I have texts from other police officers on here, and I see a couple of them on here, and there's no telling what they're saying. But these stories are real. Let me put this picture back up. Look at this guy, Nathan Lee Johns. This man is dead because, I mean, who knows, man? He may have killed himself at some point anyway. It may have been, but it didn't have to come from the facilitation of law enforcement.
Yeah, I didn't have to be the man that put him in jail.
Right.
Like it didn't need to be me. He needed to stay at the hospital or go to a facility. Like they can arrange this to go to a proper facility for treatment. You get with your county judge, and the county judge can issue an order that puts that person where they need to be, in a more secure facility, whatever the case needs to be, but not just treated and streeted. But in this case, it wasn't the street, it was a jail cell. And why didn't we know that why didn't we have any inkling that he was going to do what he said he was going to do? We went against our training. I went against the week-long mental health peace officer course that I attended. I went against a lot of the classes I had in college. When people make these threats, the safest, best course of action is just to believe it.
Right.
And then until you have reason not to believe it. We couldn't even do that. We couldn't even do the simplest thing and listen to what this man was saying. Homicidal and suicidal threats wasn't enough. And if we had just believed him, maybe he's alive today. Maybe he wouldn't have died hanging from an electrical cord in the Smith County Jail. Maybe.
Man, unfortunately, we're out of time. I feel like we could keep this conversation going for another hour or more. I wish we could. We're approaching up on 2 hours now. Zork over there's probably ready for us to go. But no, man, listen, a couple of things. One, I'm thankful that you came on and told your story. That takes, I'll be clean here, that takes guts. Okay, because so many people won't do that. Even the people that's left, they won't do it. And so I commend you for that. I commend you for the decisions that you made on your way out the door when, a lot of officers would have sit there and said, hey, this is my job. I don't want to risk it. I'm going to do what the boss says, man. And that is going against the grain. That would have been a failing of justice had you done that. And so I commend you for that. I commend you for coming on the show. I'd like to get you back on again in the future for, there's so much more that we could talk about, but thank you for coming on, man. Thank you for driving here to Dallas. I've enjoyed seeing you tonight, man, and I appreciate every bit of you.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome, man. So listen, share this, like it, share it, send it. Guys, we got to spread the message. I give this message at the end of every show. These things are not going to get out. People are not going to hear about these things unless we do our part. I'm here, and I need your help. I need you guys to share it. I need you to like it. Tell your friends about it. We have to make a difference, and it starts with conversations. It starts right here. We're on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, all the social medias, X, formerly Twitter. You can find this podcast on all major podcast platforms, whether that be Google, Apple, Spotify, you name it. All the other social medias, you can find us by @failing1justice. That's the number 1 justice. So thanks for tuning in, guys. I'm glad that I don't know how many of you are still watching, but I know some will listen to this later. I appreciate every one of you, and hope you have a good night and a good rest of your week.
This is Failing Justice.